G'day, welcome to the Noob Spearo Podcast. I am your host, Shrek, and today's episode, we're going deep into the South Island to interview a South African, which is pretty typical on this show. We interview spearfishing experts and authorities from around the world, and quite often they're living in a different country. We seem to be a fairly well-travelled bunch, and I was recently over travelling into New Zealand to visit my parents, actually. So I was down in Oamaru, and I came across Philip Van Zijl. I've been friends with him on Facebook for quite a while, and he's a really nice guy. He's really strong on reciprocity. So, like, he's the sort of guy that goes out his way to help spearos travelling around. He calls it the Spearfishing Mafia. Basically, you give a weight belt to a guy when he comes to visit you, and the favours returned when you visit his side of the world or her side of the world. And the spearfishing world is definitely like that. The spearfishing mafia is huge. And so today, we've got Philip. He's originally from Cape Town. He's been living in New Zealand since 1997. He's been a librarian for most of his life. He's owned a highly successful restaurant. He's a very interesting guy and a competition spearo in his own right. And we have a good old yarn today. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we get there, I've got way too many shout-outs because it's been too long since I did the last lot. The 2020 USA Freshwater Nationals begin on August the 3rd and go right through to the 7th. There's a whole lot of different events, and I'm hoping to possibly even get over there myself. I've received an invite, and I would love to take Mike up on it. It's just a matter of getting everything lined up and right. But if you are curious, I would encourage you to have a look at freshwaterworlds.com. But it's at Beaver Lake in Arkansas, and the water's sort of between 75 to 80 degrees. The visibility is normally somewhere between 5 to 15 feet. The hunting depth is between 5 feet and 45 feet for most fish. And there's a whole host of events. It's not just sort of competition. There's all sorts of random social stuff going on as well. If I do pop over, I'm hoping to, interview a whole host of legends while I'm over there. So we'll see how we go with that. But at this stage, I'm 50-50. 99 tips to get better at spearfishing. It's got a couple new reviews. One guy says, actionable. A fantastic book full of useful and actionable information. A must for spearos. JH says 5 stars. Love listening to them and really helpful. Thanks, guys. Got a couple of crappy reviews on there too, but I can't be bothered reading them out. But the 2020 Australian Blue Water Freedivers Classic, it's on March 20th. It's in Woolgoolga in New South Wales, hosted by the Coffs Harbour Blue Water Freedivers. And I would encourage you to head along to that. They've got Luke Potts is going to show up as well. There's going to be heaps of stuff happening there. He's going to video cover the whole event, and it looks like a fantastic event. I'd encourage you to find out more. There's a Facebook group. There's a Facebook event called Australian Blue Water Freedivers Classic 2020. March 20, pencil that into your calendars. That looks awesome. Whole bunch of great people, and comps are a real fantastic way to speed up your spearfishing very quickly, because you're just surrounded by a whole bunch of people, and the nature of the event forces you to be very strategic and think carefully about how and what you're going to do for the day, and that determines your success. And it's a really fantastic learning ground. Couple of podcast reviews. Eric Santa Cruz from US says, Shrek and Turbo, excellent podcast, guys. I've learned a lot in 100 episodes. The wealth of knowledge shared from across the globe has definitely increased my awareness of the lifestyle and made me a better spearfisherman. Listening to the experiences of so many great divers is the reason I joined the club. It's great to have that on my commute every day. One area I'd like to hear more about is how the guys who make custom wood guns come to decide on shape, design, wood, length, etc., given their target species and ocean conditions. The entire process from idea to food on the table. Just a thought and a request. So looking forward to the next 100 episodes, he says. Thanks for that, Eric. It's a top review and great to hear some ideas. I might have a man for you just around the corner, actually. Sharblouche from Aussie says, I've recently been planning on getting into spearfishing more. I've done it a few times in the Maldives when I lived there, and since moving to WA, the thoughts of sharks has always kept me in two minds. I'm always in the water either swimming or surfing, but being in the water spearfishing seems so different to me. I have so much respect for sharks, and since I've been listening to your podcast, I've been able to grow my confidence so much more just by listening to all the valuable information that you guys, along with your guests, provide. Past that, I've been able to grow my knowledge of spearfishing that much more just by listening to you guys. Absolutely great. If I could give you guys a 10 out of 10, I would give you a 20 out of 10. Anyway, Thanks for that. It's a cool review. There's a whole episode on sharks and sort of learning about how to spearfish with sharks. I'd encourage you to head back into the Noob Spearo directory and find that episode. But a couple more reviews. Practical advice for a Spearo despite location. This is a review for 99 tips to get better at spearfishing, the audiobook, available on Audible. If you come to today's show notes, noobspearo.com/Philip, there'll be a link in there to Audible. You can get our book for free. So anyway, he says, I really enjoyed listening to this as a Spearo for about a year now. Most of this information I already knew or had been applying in my life. Yet I find when I dive, I think of things that I have heard to keep me relaxed. Now after listening to this 3 times already I can review this information in my head while diving. So that was pretty cool. Fernando Caviar says, good advice here. He says, I'm not a rookie and neither am I an expert, more kind of an intermediate Spearo. This book gave me some good advice that I find useful for my area in Cancun, Mexico. Definitely recommend this book. Sean Lucas, he wrote into the noobspearo.com. He says, hey Shrek, huge fan of you and Turbo. Just listened to your latest episode on diving alone. Wondering, have you heard of the Freedive recovery vest? And just quickly, Sean, yes, I have. The Terry Mast Freedive recovery vest is something that's intrigued me for a long time. And Terry and I have chatted back and forth a few times about getting him on the show, and we just haven't been able to organise the times. But if you know him, definitely encourage him. I definitely want to get him on the show. But Sean says, it's a smart vest for freedivers that saves you in the event of a shallow water blackout. You program it to your max time you want to be down for, and it inflates if you exceed that as well as your max depth. The coolest part, though, because most of shallow water blackout occurs on the surface, it has to be deactivated after 15 seconds of surface time. Otherwise, it inflates as well. Just wondering if you've heard about it and what do you think? Only reason I haven't bought it yet is the price, which is excessive. It's about $1,800 Australian shipping here. So you definitely heard about it. I want to get Terry on the show to talk about the Freedive recovery vest. But if you do dive alone, it's definitely an investment. $1,800 is expensive, but if you weigh that up against the cost of your life, perhaps it's something you want to consider seriously. 10 out of 10 Spearfishing Podcast. This is another review from Anonymous. I have been diving for around 13 to 14 years, and this podcast and its fantastic guests have done wonders for my spearing and teaching me new things and also helping me to correct bad habits I have made over the years. I've only recently finished off every episode to date. I picked up their hardcover book as well to show my support and hope the show can continue into the future. I highly recommend people read that, as it's a good summary of all the podcasts into one awesome little book which is paired with some fantastic photos. The jokes never get old and always get me laughing while I listen at the office. I actually listen to the Noob Spearo Podcast on Google Podcasts, so I came here especially to leave this feedback. So that's why I dug up that review. Anyway, guys, there's a couple more reviews, but I'll put them in the next episode. Just wanted to shout out to Ed Martin at killshotspearguns.com. He has been a patron for a while now and makes these fantastic custom spear guns. And because I just had that request to do a bit more on wooden spear guns, and Ed kind of specialises in that, I think that's what I'm gonna get him on the show just to have a bit of a chat about it. So killshotspearguns.com. Cheers, Ed. And without further ado, let's hook in to today's interview with Philip Van Zijl. Today's Dynamite Noob Spearo podcast is brought to you by spearfishing.com.au. That's right, the fine folks over at Adreno have been supporting the Noob Spearo podcast since about episode 18, and they help pay the bills around here. Just want to encourage you to check out spearfishing.com.au and use the code Noob Spearo. You can save $20 on every purchase over $200, but it's just a great online shopping experience. The reviews are phenomenal. If you want to check out a new spear gun, new pair of booties, new pair of gloves, someone's used them before, they've written a review, it's on their website, it's all there there for you. Head along to spearfishing.com.au and thank you for shopping with today's major sponsor, Adreno. So welcome to the Noob Spearo podcast. Philip Van Zijl. I'm in Oamaru, near my parents' town where they own a motel. We managed to connect over Facebook. We've been connected on Facebook for quite a while, and little did I know, but I've actually interviewed one of your nephews, so it's really good to connect with you, Philip.
Yes, this is a lovely little town. The downside of it is absolutely most of the time very, very dirty, so we've had to learn to completely adjust diving. I mean, just looking out, my house is up on the hill, so I can see the sea. It's absolutely dirty. I was going to take Isaac out for a dive this afternoon, but we decided against that. I've been here in Oamaru for 9 years. I grew up in Cape Town, and I started diving in 1968 when I was 16. One of my schoolmates wanted to know if I would mind coming diving with him, and I was always interested, and I would have been just turned 16. So we went out, and it immediately just appealed to me. I can't remember if we actually got any fish that first time. Oh, we actually got some feed most of the time, but we didn't have any wetsuits or just very basic gear. I can't even remember what little speargun I had, but it still brought the bacon home. But soon after that, our gear was basically rugby jerseys and short pants, rugby pants. And, well, in Cape Town you had two currents. One was the Atlantic, which was the cold one, and we did most of that diving on the other side, the Indian Ocean. But Cape Town was a wonderful city for spearfishing. You could get on a train. We were on the train line that nestled along the coast. So basically what you did was just sit in the train, paid for a ticket to the end of the line. It was called Simonstown. There was a big naval base there. And then check the sea, and if it looks good in a little bay, you would just get off the next station and walk back with your gear and go for your dive, bring your stuff back in plastic bags, and get out at your station, and that was it. So you didn't need transport, so a schoolboy without any transport could do the sport. Later on, I got a little motor, or a little 50cc Honda, and after that, I got a little Lambretta scooter, 1964 model, and so we could actually get out to the end of the peninsula, and it was quite a walk. A climb down and a climb back, but that was an amazing diving spot. You could get yellowtail, which we called Kingfish, mussel cracker, basically a really good feed. There was lots of crayfish there. There were lots of paralamoon, which we called equivalent of paua here in New Zealand. Right. Yeah, so we always came back with a good feed when we got there, but it was just a hell of a climb.
What was the word again?
It was called Red Rocks on the Cape Peninsula, right at the end.
And paua, what were abalone called?
Paralamoon.
Paralamoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the Aussie. It looks a lot like the Aussie abalone. But I had a very interesting experience there. We were diving, and we just heard this engine, like massive, and we both popped up and trying to see where this boat is. We couldn't see anything, and we sort of got used to it. We could hear the diesel engines throbbing, and as we were climbing back, we looked back, and up popped a submarine.
What?
And South Africa at that point only had 3 submarines. So, I mean, what a coincidence. Then later on, I finished school. I went to university. I went to the University of Stellenbosch. I didn't do any diving with the club. They didn't dive on Sundays because you were supposed to go to church on Sundays. So I did most of my diving just with a couple of mates, and a lot of that was done on the Indian, the Indian side warmer. It was a place called Cape Hunklip, and that it was relatively deep in the old days, 45 feet, so about 15 meters. But once you got there, you could get your quota of crayfish, and at that point it was 5. You were allowed 5 a day, but later on it was 8 a day. And there were heaps of fish there too. The whole
Cob?
Yes, cob, definitely. We did shoot cob there. We once hit a whole school of small ones, and they were like really nice tasting. And at university, one of my holidays, I always had to work every university holiday, so that sort of put a bit of breaks on the diving, because I worked 7 days a week basically. I mean, that was where you earned your money. But one holiday I had a friend whose dad had a quota for Patron, Pawa, abalone, and he had a little dinghy that we used to row out, and so when it was low tide we dived crayfish, which we sold to the local hotel for exchanged for camping for free on the grounds. But he did supplement the accommodation with some dollars, and he had a pump, so we did pump diving. I did most of the diving because I was a bit fitter than my mate, and he obviously was on the boat making sure that pump is working. And we also had a set net that we just set in the harbour. So high tide we fished, low tide we dived. It was pretty full on. I got really fit, and I made enough money out of that 5 weeks of diving to basically keep me at university for a year.
Wow.
Our stroke of luck was we hit a whole school, probably the same school we saw the previous day spearfishing, of cob, kabeljo, we used to call it in South Africa. And we filled that dinghy up, that it had about like 3 inches of play between the top and the water line. And we found a local fishmonger, and that was the right size, best tasting size. So I can't remember how much we got, but that was basically about probably 40 or 50% of what we earned that whole holiday we got out of that consignment.
Wow.
University, I put myself through university, so Sundays I would go diving most Sundays. Saturdays I worked, and then after university I trained as a teacher librarian, so I was teaching, and I had a bit more time over weekends, so I did a fair bit of diving. And we, after working for 5 years in white school system, I got quite disillusioned, and I ended up resigning and retrained and took up a job in the middle of the country, which was quite a distance from any coast. But I still managed to get out, I would say, once every 2 months or so. We went to the coast, and that was mostly the East Coast, Durban, and I did lots of diving there. Also did lots of tramping. One very memorable tramp I did. I actually then moved back to the coast, which was Durban, and I lived there for 11 years. And I had a couple of very memorable tramps where I did one was a 5-day and the other one was a 7-day tramp on the coast. It was called the Wild Coast, where the Xhosa lived, the Transkei. It was one of those homelands, and we did carry food, but I managed to get enough. We were about 9, I think, in our party, and I managed to dive enough seafood to brought most of our food back home. Like I had to wait for about 3/4 of a day while the transport was sorted, and 2 of us started diving, but the other person got too cold, so I carried on, and we had at least 3 crayfish for every person. So I think had something like, it was over 30 crayfish. So we had dinner, we had breakfast, and we had lunch of the crays, and so that was pretty amazing. In Natal, it was more tropical there. I got myself a larger gun and float. Looking back at the equipment that we used those years, I mean, you just can't compare it. It was all closed cell suits. But I had a suit that I bought second hand that I probably had for about 20 years. I still had it in New Zealand. But a story, my first ever wetsuit, dry suit, was a dry suit from the 1950s, and you climb through the chest, and there was like a bungee that you wrapped around the chest hole. We went in, my mate and I went in, and it started leaking. It doesn't matter what you did, it always leaked. And so I was completely waterlogged, and I just about couldn't get out of the on the rocks. My mate said, "I'm going to give you a hand." And he put his hand out, but he had his gun at 45 degrees pointing back at me. And
loaded?
No, it wasn't loaded.
Good.
But a wave came and whacked me forward, and I just saw this gun. It was like a nightmare. I just saw this gun coming straight for my face, and I pushed my head to one side, and it got me in the neck, and I just saw all the blood, and I just thought, oh hell, this is it. And I tried to pull it out, and it was stuck. But after we sort of calmed down and realized that it was just surface blood, and it wasn't stuck in my neck, it was stuck in the wetsuit, we felt a bit better. And I just immediately I got my diving knife out and cut that suit to bits and chucked it in the first garbage that I could find.
Where did you get your equipment from?
Mostly second-hand shops. I didn't buy anything new. When I started working, I bought a few new things, including my catch bag, which I still have. Bought that in 1975. It has been panel beated a few times, including our local saddlery maker. Completely rejuvenated it. It's probably good for another 35 years.
How old's Rob Allen?
He would be way older than me. I would say I'm 68. He would be in his 70s.
Yeah, right.
He's still doing it.
Did you know him? Did you meet any? Did you see any of his early gear?
No, I didn't. But I have met him. I actually bought my 120 that I've got off him, and also a great person. He was really helpful with advice, and you could see it's he could walk the walk. Yep.
The Rabbitech was another brand that come out of there, yeah? And you've also got free divers. Were any of those brands around, or was Rob Allen the first?
No, Rob Allen, as far as I know, was the first one that sort of, but it was very expensive for South Africa. I mean, now, of course, when you come with Kiwi dollars, it was such a bargain. My first gun that I used, I bought it secondhand, was a Belay Champion, a French gun, and I've actually still got it.
Wow, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I've actually cut it down to 750. Because that's something that we had to do here. I now use as my normal gun, I use a 900 Rob Allen that my sister brought over when I turned 60. And it's a really nice little gun. It's accurate. It's a rail gun. I was going to buy a 750 rail of Rob, and he said to me, his advice is just go for a normal open muzzle. Said a rail wouldn't do make a big difference to 750, which I did, but I never liked that little 750. It shot all over the place. So I ended up selling it. It could have been a bent spear, in hindsight.
One of the things we're talking about before is that you recommend like young guys rig their own guns. I mean, back when you started, you had to rig all your own gear. What was some of the stuff you learnt early on?
And there wasn't YouTube. So it was Len Brown, is it Len?
Len Jones.
Len Jones. Read his bits and pieces. And just basically do what I'm doing now, share it with youngsters. Lots of people helped me over the years, and it is there's a Maori whakatauki, a Maori saying that says, he aroa whakato, he aroa putamai, which means if you give out kindness, it comes back to you. And so a lot of people, some of my diving mates are not keen when I take youngsters out to our so-called spots. I have some spots that I don't share, like my power spots, but fish move. And I'd much rather have more people in the sport and share my experiences. And I often help people with setting up their first guns, because down here you don't need a tropical gun. Anything between a 500. A 750 is all you need here. Even 900 is sometimes when you hunt in thick kelp as a hassle.
I love your ideas about reciprocity and the community. The Spearfishing Mafia, you called it the other day, because it was very easy to make a connection with you. And I share a lot of those same feelings. Like, I think if you teach young guys how to spearfish, you also get to teach them a lot about the conservation and the ethics side of spearfishing as well. And if you don't teach them, then someone else is, and it might not necessarily be the right way. So I'm looking forward to digging a bit more into that a little bit further into the interview with our Veterans Vault section. But so you've talked a little bit about gear specifics for down here, somewhere between a 500 and an 800 mil gun. What else are you using down here? I'd imagine a 5 mil wetsuit.
I have a 5 mil in summer, and in winter initially I only had a 7 mil top, and with a 5 mil bottom was fine. But then a mate of mine gave me second-hand, well, it was pretty new, from Wellington, gave me a second-hand 7 mil, and so in winter I use a full 7 mil, and in summer the 5 mil. The problem, I've got one problem. I need a lot of weight to get myself buoyant over the last 4 meters. So in winter I need to put 14 kilos of lead on. In summer, 12. So it's and even that 2 kilos in the 5 mil suit gives you a lot more flexibility to get into tight spots, especially if you go for power or crays. And I've also started wearing a harness because of the weight that I'm carrying. The harness makes a big difference on my lower back. But I initially had all my weight in the harness, and then a mate of mine observed when I was finning that my fins were breaking the surface. So now I wear a rubber belt. I've used other material, but I wouldn't recommend anything but a rubber, a stiff rubber. You get rubber belts that are cheaper, but they are too flexible. Like the Rob Allen or Free Divers. The Wetty one I've also used. Wetty is a local New Zealand supplier. Ocean Hunter also makes a really good harness. And I actually have the Ocean Hunter harness, and I've had it for 9 years. It's still going strong.
So do you wear weight on your legs to keep your legs down?
No.
Okay.
No, I've never thought of that. The other point that is something I've only learned relatively recently is put all your weights on your back and not on the front. Because if anything happens, you will drift. If you are properly buoyant, you will drift face up. Whereas if you have it on your stomach, it will put your face underwater.
All right, well, I'd like to take you back a little bit once again and find out maybe about a memorable fish experience. I don't know if you can remember the day and the species and everything about it, but give us a story.
My most memorable fish experience would be my last dive I had in Tauranga. A mate of mine said, I'll go and show you my spot. And we went out with his boat, myself, himself, and his father-in-law, and we got to a pin, 15 to 20 meter visibility. It was just absolutely perfect. There was a bit of swell coming up, but not too bad. And I got a good, probably about a 13 kilo kingfish. And so I thought, well, I was on my way back to the south, and at that point, you didn't get any kingfish here, although they are now being seen on our reefs here. This last summer, a mate of mine saw one. He couldn't get a shot in, but then the other guys didn't see any fish. So I did a deep dive because I thought I saw shadows like really deep. And then they disappeared, and I knew it was a school. And I dived down really slowly, and I mean, that's also advice that I give to youngsters, and I do it naturally, is do your duck dive, and you just fin really slowly, and once you are past the gravitation point, like 3-4 meters, I've set my weight belt. You just glide and don't use any energy. And as I went down, I could see the shadows, and I was just hoping that it is actually kingfish. And they came closer, and then I had a 30-meter line on me, so I would have been about 25 meters at that point. And I obviously had to stop, and I slowly started finning up, and I could see them following me, and they followed me right up, and my two mates both got a fish in. At that point, I was getting quite nauseous, and I went back to the boat, and I looked back, and I saw probably the size of about 2 rugby fields, or even larger. I just saw this boil, and I immediately put my mask and my fins back, and I hopped in. And the boil-up was a school of Kahawai. It's also quite a prolific fish here, which is the favorite target, eating target for kingfish. And I went down sort of under the school, and it's just difficult to describe it. There was the school of kingfish. I ended up shooting one, and that was weighed probably, difficult to say, it had a 2.5 kilo Kahawai in it. When I took that out and gutted it, it was still 21 or 23 kilos left. So I would have said, if I'd weighed it with gills and blood and everything in it, it would have been like 27 kilo. It was a monster. It wasn't very, but it was a deep one. So that would have been one of my most memorable fish that I'd shot. Hey, the other one was possibly a kingfish also. We went diving also with a boat, but another mate of mine behind Motiti Island, that's off Tauranga. And my wife, at that point, she's from the South Island in New Zealand. She only liked blue cod, but she did eat red moki. So I always used to shoot her 1 or 2 red moki, and in New Zealand that's not quite cricket because they're very stupid, and nobody admits that we've ever shot a red moki. Did I say blue or red? Red. But I think we all have. But anyhow, I just saw it, and then I saw the shadow out of the corner of my eye, and I was given another little gun by a neighbor who hadn't died for 40 years, and he said, "Oh, but I still have my little gun, and you can have it if you want." And it was a little 90, and it was also a champion. So I just thought I'll go and test, because I just rigged it. I'll go and test it on this red moki, and the next minute, this 13 kilo kingfish came past because we were gutting the fish, and I just thought, I can't shoot it. I didn't have a shooting line or a float or anything, and I was going to lose the gun on the first dive, but I also felt I couldn't not. So I squeezed it, and it wasn't a good shot. It was a stomach shot. But instead of what you would normally do is let go of your gun and go and get some fresh air, I got a turbo boost from somewhere, and I just swam right onto it, bear hugged it, grabbed it between my legs, and did a very strange movement to get back to the surface. And it did come alive, but I had my knife. The other thing I do, in particular with kingfish hunting, I carry my knife on my arm, because if you are hugging it, it is a lot closer than to try and find it on your leg or on your belt. But that's just my preference. So I had it on my left arm, and I could icky it immediately. And I said to my mate who was cleaning the fish, I said, "Hey, I got a kingy." And he said, "Yeah, right," with that little popgun. And I hauled the kingfish out. He immediately wanted to hop in, and I said, "No, it was just a loner." So I suppose I've had 2 memorable fish, and they were both kings.
I always like to ask people what their favourite species is to hunt and why. I mean, you've brought up 2 yellowtail kingfish there. Are there any techniques that you want to talk about or identify with the way you hunt those fish in particular, or you can choose another species, up to you?
I have shot some snapper. Snapper is a really challenging fish, I think, both in Aussie and in New Zealand. You're either burly or you have to be really stealthy. I haven't really been that successful with snapper. I mean, I've shot a few. My largest would have been 3-4 kilos, so I haven't shot any of the big monsters that you get up off Great Barrier and of Auckland or even of the Tauranga Islands. But with kingfish, main thing is slow movements, calmness. Don't look at them. Look past them, and wait for them to get within target range. I also keep my gun next to my body, really close, upside down. I hold it with handle facing up, so that when you are ready, it's just one movement.
So you bring it up.
I bring it up
in one motion.
Yeah, like in one motion. I have disabled all my safeties, and there are two schools of thought. I think we all have a story of the big one that got away. Mine was a massive trevally in Tauranga, and it was like 2 meters in front of me, and I had it perfectly lined up, pressed the trigger, and it wouldn't work. And by the time I had the safety off, it was gone. So that was the one that got away. And it would probably have been, I would say, at least a 5, 6, it would have been more than 5 kilo fish that presented itself perfectly for me. So
I think some days, like, you go out, you're lucky if you squeeze the trigger 4 or 5 times, on a day. That's typical. That's maybe pretty typical for me anyway. And if one of those, is your safety on, and you bugger up that fish, that's 20% of your shots for the day gone. And they're a heartbreaker, those ones. So I completely get the sawing your safety off or disabling it.
I only put my finger in the trigger when I want to pull it. So that's my safety. We've all had guns go off at certain points without intending it to. But to me, there's basic safety. Never put common sense, but I'll repeat it. Never put a gun on a boat loaded. I always try and get the spear out of a fish when I hand it up to the boat person. So it's all common sense. Having said that, my mate and I, local mate, he's on 2 occasions. The next time we go diving, he said, "Look at my rubbers. He'd forgotten to unload it and left it like for a week or 2 weeks loaded." And the rubbers actually memorizes that.
I think it's happened to everyone.
So, no.
All right, so some good tips and ideas there about guns and shooting kingfish. What about a toughest situation or a scary moment you've had out in the ocean? What happened? What were the consequences, or what could they have been, and maybe what did you learn from it?
I shot a moki, blue moki, a real blue moki, and it got off the spear and it went into a crevice, and I followed it, and as I followed it, a surge came and pushed me right into the crevice, and I was stuck. It was the stuff nightmares are made of, and I just told myself one thing: stay calm. And that is a pretty big ask, and because if a surge pushed you in, hopefully it will come out at some point. And I waited, and I was running out of air because I had already been chasing the moki, and I just thought I'll go for broke, and I expelled the air in my chest, and that was enough to actually dislodge me. And at that point, as I predicted, the surge actually pulled me out. But I tell you, I was pretty shaken.
Was it code brown?
Yep, very close, very close. So, lesson: is, and we've all had that, chasing crays, especially big crays that go into crevices like that. Be careful. One instance is there was a big crayfish, a mate of mine located, and it went back into the crevice, and he was a bit thinner than I was, so he went in, and I literally held his legs and to be ready to pull him out. We got the crayfish.
I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
When I learned up in parts here, when we used to get a lot of crays on scuba there, because the reefs, most of the good reef is in 20 plus metres and the water's filthy. A lot of current as well, so scuba's pretty common up there. And we got taught to cross our fins behind us, and that way your buddy would know if your fins are crossed that you're in trouble and you actually need to be pulled out. But I've been in there. I had a couple of overly aggressive buddies, and I was in a hole one day getting crays, and he must have thought I was stuck because I was struggling trying to get this cray. But he started to grab my feet, and I'm fighting him to stay in the hole, and he's fighting to pull me out. And he's getting me backwards and forwards like what I was trying to do to the crayfish, and my head was smashing into the roof of this cave, and I got out. I was not impressed with him. But I think communication with your buddy, having a buddy, and that's some good takeaways for that sort of stuff for sure. Is your major issue spearfishing all about equalising? I got good news for you. We've been pumping Ted Hardy's immersion freediving equalising classes for a while now for free on the Noob Spearo Podcast because we love it that much. It's effective. Now, his Roadmap to Frenzal class is absolutely excellent. It's a full-on video course that will help you to master the technique of Frenzal because you're probably doing Valsalva. Now, Ted sweetened it up a little bit more. He's got a 15% discount code. Go to noobspearo.com/TED, get full access to the Roadmap to Frenzal equalising class, and if you don't learn how to Frenzal within 30 days, he'll give you a full money back refund. Now, everyone wants to get beyond that 15 to 40 foot mark, that 5 to 10 metre mark, and you don't want to be going upright to have to equalise. You need to learn the Frenzal equalising technique, and the best way to do that is spend a little bit of time doing Ted Hardy's course. Come to noobspearo.com/TED, get a 15% discount. Enjoy. Now, I don't know about you, but I love new gear, and spearfishing.com.au have got a huge range. Mad flat shipping rate, especially in Australia, and if you use the code NoobSpearo, you not only support us, but you get $20 off every purchase over $200. That's right, pump in the code NoobSpearo at checkout, NOOBSPEARO at spearfishing.com.au, and you will save $20 on every purchase over $200. No brainer. Thanks, Adriano. Let's move into Veterans Vault. Let's chat about the Spearfishing Mafia, the broad community, and some of the reciprocity that you touched on earlier.
My wife, who's never met a Spearo before I met her, is just always amazed. I mean, I'll combine this with talking about traveling. I travel a lot for my work, conferences and meetings, and some of the conferences are in Australia. So whenever I have the opportunity, I take my gear with me. I normally try not to take lead for obvious reasons, but a suit at least, and speargun. And I use a large golf bag. It's probably a good 1.7 meters long, and probably about 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. And I bought it at a garage sale for $10 or something. And I tell you, it's just about falling to bits. And as we speak, I've got a mate that is taking it to somewhere. No, actually just to the North Island. So that's part of the community. I mean, why go and he was going to buy a bag and probably only use it once a year. So people are like that. When I got to, no, actually before I got to Melbourne, when I went out there, I was contacted. I just put it out on our Spearo's Corner. We used to have a Spearo. It's still running, but I think Facebook has sort of superseded it, really. And Kiwi that lived in Melbourne contacted me and said, no, I'll take you out. And we had a really great dive. We managed to get out to, it was a long swim, like an hour fin. But we were going against the tide, so I thought, okay, coming back. But unfortunately, the tide changed, so we were still against the...
So you worked both ways?
Yeah, and it was about a 3-hour, if not more, dive, and the sea had come up in the meantime, and it was pretty scary, and I got really terrible cramps, both legs, and we were making virtually I was making virtually no headway, and but strange what you remember something like that, because there were 3 tiny little 3-centimeter fish sort of guiding me in the front, and I just thought, that could have been my 3 dead brothers escorting me out, and it actually gave me a focus, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, and it got shallower later, so I would hold on to a rock, a bit of kelp, and rest the cramping legs. And we did see some kingies, and I didn't want to shoot. They came right past my gun, but I didn't want to shoot them because I thought I'd give my host the opportunity, but he missed.
Oh, bugger.
But we did get back. So it doesn't matter where you go, North Island, here in New Zealand, anywhere in the world, literally. If you stick something on a Facebook page, somebody will take you out. As I've done quite a few occasions, people have to travel through our little town, so I invite people, and my wife is used to strange people arriving here in camper vans and making use of our hospitality, because again, I've had that from a lot of people. Traveling tips. Most obviously don't use the word GUN at an airport. Just say fishing equipment. What I do with that particular bag, that 120 just fits in. You have to really force it in, but it fits in perfectly. The 130 actually protruded. And then the spear obviously is longer, so that protrudes, but I just turn it around and put a big plug on the sharp end to prevent the obvious, and then just the notch side sticking out. I have had some debates on airports, but I've never had any real problem. Only person that gets most stress would be my wife, because she's always convinced we're going to be locked up. And then coming back, I've recently bought a cooler bag. It's like a dry bag, but it's a cooler bag that takes up to 20 liters, and you can put a heap of kingfish fillets in there. And tramping, I've done lots of tramping and carrying my stuff with me. We did a tramp on near Akaroa, and I didn't take a wetsuit. I just took my old 1970s rugby jersey, nylon rugby jersey, and that keeps you, even the cold water here, you could stay in for about 20 minutes, half an hour max. And water was too dirty, but we got a good feed of power, fed the whole hut. Did the same on the Rakiura track at Stewart Island. Fed the whole hut for 2 nights, and that was pretty memorable too.
Pretty tough hiking with your dive gear.
Yes, I've got Pack Horse Ocean Hunter Plat, and what I've done with that, and this is something I can share. I put little kayak wheels under it, and with the theory that and I tested it in soft sand, it worked perfectly fine, except that the Rakiura track has got, when I say hundreds, I mean thousands of steps. So my son and I ended up carrying it with a long staff, a really springy wood here called lance wood, and Maori use it as spears, and carried it for most of so discretion was the better part of valor. When I got back, I got a water taxi, but my son ended up not going with me. But with that particular tramp, I did carry my wetsuit because it was semi-winter, but it was an amazing dive.
I just had a couple of thoughts, like travelling this time. I normally borrow a friend's sports tube, which is a little bit like the golf bag idea, but they're purpose made, but they're bloody expensive. But I think some of these higher ticket items, like a blue water spear gun, blue water floats, these elaborate travel cases, they're items that you definitely want to share with your good mates, and because you only use them once or twice a year, and if everyone gets use out of it, it's much better done. That is one of the beauties of being in the Spearfishing Mafia. I'd like to see some collapsible fins and some collapsible spear guns. I don't know why that hasn't come on the market. I haven't seen them anyway.
I've seen a collapsible wooden one.
Okay.
Yeah. Facebook somewhere, where you literally split it up in 3 sections like a fishing rod. It was obviously homemade, I think, so it is possible.
I always like dropping the ideas and then not doing it myself. Did you have any other pointers for making the most of the spearfishing community? Obviously, like being a great host yourself, and it all comes back around, doesn't it?
An example that I shared with you earlier was Rob Allen, the man himself. But when I had an opportunity to go to Samoa, I phoned, and I'd never dived tropics. I mean, Natal could be sort of semi-tropics. So I phoned him and just asked him for some pointers, and Darren Shields from Wetties, and he asked me what gun are you using. I said the 120, and he said no, nothing under a 130, because your trophy, most amazing fish, you're going to miss it. And and he said, if you don't want to spend that money, I'll send you one of my guns. And but fortunately, I managed to get one on Trade Me for a good price, so I never used his offer. But I mean, that is just another example. And I've offered my 130 subsequently to other people. I've got a tropical 35-liter Rob Allen float, which people have borrowed. So exactly what you're saying, Isaac. I think it's there's a lot of wastage, and a lot of that is based on I've got to have it for in case. I go to garage sales most Saturday mornings, and it's just amazing what stuff people get rid of after they've only used it once or twice.
This is a bloody good example. I mean, I come over here to have a family holiday because my parents own a motel here in Oamaru, and you've lent me a compressor and a couple of nail guns and maybe some dive gear tomorrow if we get out. But we'll see how the weather goes. But yeah, so you're a good example of it too.
Hey Noobers, it's Jeremy here from Spearing Magazine with an update for you guys. Shrek and Turbo have been doing such a great job with telling guys about Spearing Magazine that we've actually sold out of most of our back issues and catalogs. But I just wanted to let you guys know that we have an international subscription available just for you guys. Yeah, from Spearing Magazine. I'm Jeremy Campbell. Thank you guys. Go to spearingmagazine.com. Check out the international subscription. Aw, yeah.
Today's Noob Spearo Podcast is also proudly brought to you in partnership with penetratorfins.com. Get on there, guys. Have a look at some of the designs they've got. They've got clears. The blacks are beautiful. Check out the Noob Spearo custom Oki print. It's mad as well. Larry's got a full range of wicked designs, and he's got a beautiful finish on his fins. He's recently updated his manufacturing process. It's even better than it was before. He makes some of the best fins in the world, and to make that offer even sweeter, pump in the code Noob Spearo at checkout and save another $20. Penetratorfins.com. Support the Noob Spearo Podcast by shopping with our sponsor. Look, let's move on. We've talked a lot about your dive bag already, but is there anything else with equipment that you do a little bit differently than other people, or is there some recommendations you have around equipment?
I like to use a catch bag. I know it puts some brakes on you. I normally don't use it when I go into competitions, but it saves you getting back to your plat. Most people down south use plats. Either the wetty one or one of the other ones. There's the Harrison and of course the old one that I've got.
So a plat is a float boat?
A float boat, yeah. I think we call it plats here. Yeah. Because we have a lot of harassment here from seals to a lesser extent, but we get massive hooker sea lions here, and we had an experience at the 2012 South Island Championships where most of our fish got stripped off by a massive hooker sea lion that literally just went from float to float, and there was no fish to weigh in except two people, two teams. One was myself and Judy Johnson, and the other one was Kevin Mullen, and I can't remember his mate. They had a float boat, and I took our catch to the car. So we ended up walking off with the two main trophies, not because we were so good, but because we were so clever. I always carry two knives. I've never needed two knives, but I carry one on my pouch, on my thigh, and the other one on my arm. And a little trick to save the loss of knives is you can either make a little twirly whirly attachment by wrapping like a 200-pound line around a pencil tightly, anchor it on the one side, wrap it around tightly, the whole of the pencil basically, a length that's at least, I would say, a meter, and then cut it and attach the top bit also, like just drilling a little hole through the pencil or piece of dowel stick, and that it doesn't untwirl, and then stick it in boiling water for like 2-3 minutes, put it in cold water, and then you'll have a spiral mono, yeah. So you attach one to your sheet and one to the knife. So if you drop it, you don't lose it.
So and then the mono tucks away nicely because it will hold that memory.
Yeah, it's not a big... The other option that I've been using instead of that is you get, at most good shoe stores, you get spiral shoelaces.
Yeah.
And they come in packets of 2 for like $3 or $5, whatever, and that works just as well. It's just the right length, and you don't lose your knife. And people spend a lot of money on knives. You get little blue handled knives for free with most wetsuits these days. There's nothing wrong with those little knives. They've got good steel, and they can icky kingfish. So what more do you want?
One thing I like about your idea there is, like when you're laying on the surface and you're burling a fish frame or whatever, if you're doing surface burley, you can just let it go, and it'll stay attached to your sheath.
I often do that. And I have lost one with when the sheath came out of my leg pocket. So that was a bit of a bummer. And I lost one knife when I let it go, and the little homemade mono broke. And that was a bit disappointing. But with knives, I have a knife that's both serrated and it's got a cutting knife. And to import these has become a bit of a problem since we've had the massacre in Christchurch with knives. So I haven't had the need, but I have seen on some Facebook postings that people have been harassed and they've been confiscated. Yeah.
Bit crazy, isn't it? Every person's got a slasher and a chainsaw and a hose, and every farm implement you can use can be used to kill someone if you're imaginative enough. But I get it. What about sort of a faster pace round of questions is Spearo Q&A. Question 1. Could you describe what the spearfishing experience means to you in one sentence?
It's just my happy place. You can't explain to anybody that feeling when you do your duck dive and you just glide. That's why I do it. And the food, of course.
Free food. Someone actually said last time, I think the most expensive way to catch free food. So that was good. What is the single best piece of advice you've ever been given for spearfishing?
Don't overdo it. Dive to your capabilities, and as one gets older, it's not a pissing competition, and that is one of the dangers of competitions is people overdo it. It is, to me, it's about having fun, being in my happy place, how I recharge my batteries. But don't overdo it.
Cool. Who has been the most influential person or people in your spearfishing?
Probably Len. It was, and Jacques Cousteau. I read all his books when I was a teenager growing up.
Hans Haas as well.
Hans Haas to an extent, yeah. But yeah.
You spent a lot of time in libraries, so I was curious as to your spearfishing freediving library. Have you come across some books that have really influenced you in particular?
I can't remember who it was, but it was a book from the 50s. A mate of mine bought it second hand. He's our local archivist. And he said, it's a really good book. I said, have you read it? He said, no, but you can have it read it first. And I read it, and I got to about page 25, and here was a picture of him with a dolphin that he's killed.
Oh, right.
And I actually couldn't carry on reading it. Wow. But I suppose it was a different era then. Of course, I have to be careful in my library not to buy too many spearfishing books, but we've sort of got a few basic ones. I can't even recall.
99 tips to get better at spearfishing, probably.
Yep, no, that's definitely. Yeah.
It's a Noob Spearo book, so you got to have that on the shelf. Couple more questions, and then we're out of here. If you had to start all over again, what would you do differently?
Probably getting a decent wetsuit a lot earlier. It just makes such a difference. And My mother was Jewish, so I really battle to get a mask that fits me, and I finally found a mask that fitted me, so I just bought two because it was on a special for like $18 or $19. I normally have to buy the $135 one. But the equipment, I even had some pneumatic guns. I didn't like them. And fortunately, they were all stolen when out of my dad's garage. So I did get a payout for that, and I bought myself a decent spear gun. That was when I bought the arbalete. If you're not warm, it is not fun. And your fins, I've got a set of self-adjusting, I think they Omar, foot pockets, and they fit my feet perfectly. And because I've got one high instep, so that makes it really difficult to get foot pockets that fit properly. And I have carbon freediver fins, and that's made a big difference. We didn't have a choice in the 60s. I mean, there just wasn't any equipment. You just had to get old scuba gear, and
it's a bloody good era to go spearfishing in. Do you have much sympathy for young guys when they when they email in with their problems with equipment, or what?
No, I mean, the one thing I tell people when they buy equipment is buy decent stuff. Don't look at the brand, and look at the fit of the suit. It's got to fit you, and obviously not too big, because then it is not effective. And as an old school diver said to me once, well, Philip, you know, it's not the camo is not for the fish; it's for the diver. So I buy suits. Like even different top with a different bottom colors. I don't care if it's at the end of a line where they have some remnants. I just go for it. You don't need to spend a lot of money. We don't dive as deep here as on the North Island, so suits last a lot longer. They don't compress.
Who's the best person to go spearfishing with now?
I've got a little band of brothers here. Every now and then I get a WhatsApp message from one of them, and I say to my wife, it's my Portuguese adopted son calling. He arrived here from Portugal, also works for council, and he said, induction, he said, does anybody do spearfishing here? And a whole choir of people went up, Philip. So I do a lot of diving with him. There's also a South African boy that's come over from Natal. He lives here, and I heard him inquiring about spearfishing equipment in Afrikaans. He was speaking Afrikaans to his wife, and I called him to one side and I said, listen, don't buy spearfishing equipment in a dive shop. So that's advice I want to give somebody. Having said that, you get dive scuba shops that are excellent, that do both sports. But this other mate of mine he was an American in Tauranga, he got the most terrible advice. So go to a specialist shop and go and talk to people that are in the sport and not into scuba. The dive Otago people in Dunedin, they are excellent. A lot of them also do spearfishing. And also underwater hockey is an excellent fitness I've been playing it for years. Obviously, there isn't a pool here, but I am going back to Dunedin the end of this year. So that's something I'm looking forward to. And in both of the clubs where I played here in Dunedin and in Rotorua, most of the guys there also do spearfishing, and most of us have spare suits, spare fins, equipment, guns. So go and try it out first. Go with people that will teach you.
Awesome. All right. Where can people maybe come and connect with you if they want to, Philip?
I'm on Facebook as Philip with one L, VAN, new word, ZIJL Senior, because I've got a son also called Philip. And just message me, and I'll gladly have a chat or have a dive.
Awesome, man. I've got a ton of awesome stories out of here today, and a few really interesting tips too. The knife one was quite memorable. Any parting guidance or wisdom for the community?
Need to set the example. A lot of people have a different perspective of spearos. 90% of us target. We don't fill our bins or float boats up with death piles. And it's interesting that our New Zealand Spearo Facebook page, they actually don't publish death piles. Set the example, and with taking, respect size. I mean, what I always do is, if I have a doubt, I don't shoot. If it's marginal, don't bother.
That's my adage too. Awesome catching up with you, Philip. And so Philip Van Zijl. It'll be linked up, everything we chatted about today in today's show notes. So yeah, awesome to chat with you, man. What a bloody legend. Philip Van Zijl, absolute champion. If you go to today's show notes, I'm going to make it easy for you. noobspearo.com/Philip with one L. I'm going to have everything linked up, including his Facebook profile. And I hope it came through, that reciprocity principle came through loud and clear today. Philip's an absolute champion. I was over in Oamaru just to visit my parents for a bit of a getaway over Christmas. I didn't actually manage to get out for a dive with him just due to weather and conditions and that. And I was actually keen though after having a look at a few of the spots. The water was only 14 degrees, but nevertheless, I've saved something for next time. So yeah, shout out to Philip on Facebook if you would like to connect with him. But he's down there in Oamaru, the South Island of New Zealand, and there's some bloody interesting spearfishing down there. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you would like to support the show further, go to patreon.com/Noob Spearo. Become one of our Patreon listeners. So that's it for me today, guys. Thanks for listening. Over and out. Adreno Spearfishing are today's proud sponsor of the Noob Spearo Podcast. They stock a huge range of equipment that you can find in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and now Perth. That's right, spearfishing.com.au have got a huge range of gear. I encourage you to get along, use the code Noob Spearo, NOOB SPEARO, and save yourself $20 on every purchase over $200 when you shop online.